This is R2D Tech, and today I thought I'd share some of my thoughts as a student currently studying aerospace engineering around taking notes on the iPad throughout the last couple of years of high school and now at university, so stay tuned. So here it is, the iPad Pro 2018, and this is the 11-inch model. Of course they released two, the 11-inch or the 12.9-inch, which is much larger. And then recently in 2020 they did an update where the main update was mainly around the camera system. So not that much of a big deal in terms of note taking. To start with, one thing that I'd highly recommend dealing with straight away if you want to take notes on one of these things is the whole friction issue. So when you take notes on a normal piece of paper with a pencil, say, it's quite easy to form letters because you're used to the friction between the pencil and the paper, which kind of helps you not to mess up the separate letters. Whereas on an iPad Pro like this without any screen protector, it's really glossy and almost frictionless, so you will find that it's really easy to mess up letters which you've never messed up before. Of course, it's a bit of a learning curve at first, but after a few days or maybe a couple of weeks, you'll find it's actually pretty easy to write on a tablet like this. But one thing that you can do straight away to get ahead of the issue is to get some sort of screen protector which adds friction. There's quite a few options out there. Probably the most advertised one is the paper-like screen protector, which has got some really good reviews to it. Although it is a bit pricey, so I personally went with something called Paperfeel on Amazon. And again, there's lots of options, so just choose one which works for you. The reason I recommend a screen protector like this which adds friction is that even though you can get pretty used to writing on the glossy display of the iPad Pro, which is what I basically did throughout my high school career, it does actually waste a lot of time and become a little frustrating, because here and there you'll mess up some words and letters, which is quite common, and you'll have to rub them out and rewrite them, which again gets frustrating, but also it wastes time, which in the whole idea of adding to your productivity is a huge downside. Also, quite a nice side benefit is that these screen protectors tend to be matte, and so they offer really good glare protection. I personally found it quite a big issue where it's a really sunny day and the light reflects off my display, and so I find it quite hard to see the content. But with this, it really improves because it counteracts that sunlight or whatever light may be in the room. The next thing to consider is which app you want to use to take the notes with. And as with most things, there's several options out there. The most obvious of which is probably the Apple Notes app, but I personally definitely wouldn't recommend using this as your primary note-taking app, just because it lacks quite a few basic note-taking features like A4 pages. With that said though, even though you shouldn't use it for your primary note-taking, it is really useful for just scribbling down some thoughts or calculations. Especially in engineering, which I do, I find myself just scribbling quick calculations down all the time, just because I don't necessarily want them in my neat notes, but it's an easy access tool to get that done. One thing that makes that really easy on the iPad Pros is the feature where you can just tap on the screen with the pencil and it will open up the Notes app. But for your actual neat note-taking, I would personally choose between two apps, either Notability or GoodNotes. I personally use Notability for the main reason that I think it personally looks more professional when you print it out, but GoodNotes is also really good and probably, in my opinion, has a slightly better filing system. If you'd like me to go into more depth on either of those apps, or maybe compare them, then let me know in the comments below and I could make a dedicated video just to that, because I have actually used both apps quite extensively. Now, in terms of taking notes in high school, you do get quite a lot of actual sheets, which means that it can be a bit of a hassle, but there is a way around it. So there's several good scanning apps. I use one called Scanner Pro, where you can just scan the actual sheet document into your iPad and import it into the note-taking app you're using, like Notability. And once you've done this, you can mark it up with the Apple Pencil just like a normal sheet document, and if your teacher wants it in physical form, you can then print it off. But I find in most cases that the teachers are perfectly happy just getting it by email if that's more convenient for you. In terms of university though, or I guess if you're in the US, college, it becomes quite a lot easier, since instead of receiving physical documents and sheets, it's more the case that they just upload lecture slides or problem sheets onto the website. So you can eliminate that step where you have to scan them in. you can just download them as a PDF and upload them into your notes. This might not sound like a big deal, but in terms of doing it every single day, it becomes a lot easier where you can just download a PDF from a website. And perhaps if you're in high school, one thing that you can do, which I found worked with some subjects, is if you just ask the teacher to email you the sheets or PDFs before the lesson, then it can be quite a lot easier, since they're probably just printing the sheets off from their computer anyway. A nice benefit of having the iPad Pro in class or the lecture theatre is that you can take notes on it, but also it's a great multitasking device. And by multitasking, I don't mean like watching YouTube while you're doing work, because that's very counterproductive. What I mean by multitasking is where you have several apps, all of which you're using to do the same task. So for taking notes, that means having the note-taking app as the main app, and then having something like Safari as either a pop-up tab or side-by-side view, so you can also research things while you're taking notes and maybe even drag some images in. That's one thing that the iPad Pro does really well. It's got a really good link between apps that you're using in the multitasking mode, so you can drag text over, images, whatever you want, even GIFs or GIFs. We'll keep that pronunciation argument stored away for now. Moving on though, another thing which you'll come to appreciate quite a lot is that when people are taking notes on paper, either in university or school, you'll see them walking around with huge binder folders or rucksacks which are exploding with loose documents, ripped sheets, whatever. And it's obviously an organization nightmare when you've got a lot of subjects or modules and each one has a ton of notes for it. Whereas when you're using the iPad, it's all on just one tablet, which is quite lightweight in comparison to all of those folders, and quite well organized as well, since you don't have any sheets falling out of the iPad. This is actually quite a huge deal, because if you title your notes correctly, then you can just search for any note you want, any subject, any topic, within a second, and you never have to worry about losing these things, provided they're well backed up onto something like Google Drive or iCloud or even Dropbox. In turn, this could have quite a nice positive compound effect on your level of productivity, which will then probably help you study better as well. Not to mention, you won't have to worry about sheets getting messed up in your backpack, and also you won't have to worry about the weight of carrying 5 binder folders in one go. If all of that wasn't enough, then I would also argue that taking notes on a good app like Notability or GoodNotes can have quite a positive impact on the actual state of your notes. And by that I mean how effective they are at helping you study. This is because there's such a large tool set on these apps which encourage you to make your notes more colourful, visual, and also probably more concise as well. I think when you take notes on the iPad Pro, you sort of change your perspective as to what a sheet of notes should look like. So in the past, when I just took notes with pen and paper, they would be quite bland, single colour, no highlighting, and also just bullet point form or paragraph form. Whereas when I look at my iPad, I see a canvas where I can write anywhere I want. It doesn't seem like just a sheet of paper with lines anymore. I can sort of subdivide into diagrams, I can add images from the internet and annotate them, and say if I'm in a lecture or something and there's an interesting image on the screen, I can use the quick scan app or something to take a photo of the lecture that I'm seeing and then just add it to the notes and annotate. All of these sorts of things end up making your notes a lot more visual, which can also help you revise later on. And another positive thing for when you're revising is that usually when you see like a huge binder folder of notes, it can be quite daunting, so it sort of puts you off revising because you see how much content there is. But when it's all on a single tablet like this, it's a lot less daunting and you're more likely to just jump into it and start revising because you can't actually see how large the document is until you're already going through it. Okay, so I've gone through lots of positives as to why note-taking is really good and a lot better in my opinion than pen and paper on the iPad Pro. But there is a negative, which of course is the battery. You don't expect your pen and paper to run out of battery anytime, but you do have to worry about this when you're using a tablet. The good thing is though that these guys tend to have really good battery life. I've had this one for over 2 years and it still hasn't let me down. I've never gone to a lecture or school or anything and had it run out of battery throughout the day. But if you are worried about it, you can always throw in a good power bank into your bag and take that along with you as well, which doesn't add too much weight considering you're not carrying any folders. and that's just a good peace of mind that if it runs out of battery, you can charge it. Also bring the cable along and the plug so you can just plug it in during a break. And before I forget, I did just think of another positive, which is that all of my textbooks I have in e-textbook form, which are stored on here as well, and use them in the multitasking view so I can have the notes on the left and the textbook on the right. Definitely though, you want to be careful when you throw this into your backpack, because it's not actually that hard to bend this device and break it. For that reason, I would recommend getting a case because it will help protect both the display and also the structure of the device, but also having a case can add some more versatility. For example, I have this quite simple folio case which just attaches to the iPad magnetically with the magnets on the back of the iPad, and then it also closes to cover the front of the display as well, while still leaving this edge open for the Apple Pencil to go on. The added benefit is that you can then use this to prop the iPad up. So you can either have it this way, which will prop it up so that you can watch some content, or you can then turn it around and have the iPad almost flat but slightly elevated, which can help with things like drawing, and you can use it in this mode when you're writing. And of course, if you want to, you can just completely flatten it out and wrap it around the back. Then you've got a completely flat iPad again. The other option is a good keyboard case, which Apple make their own version of, but also you can pick up something from a company like Logitech, which I have. And these ones are actually pretty good from Logitech because the actual keys on the keyboard are really clicky, whereas the Apple ones are a lot more flat. The new ones even come with a trackpad, so you can use those new trackpad features which are on the iPad software as well. That might be something to consider if you want to use the iPad more as a laptop. Personally though, I found that trying to make the iPad a laptop, which it isn't really, is a bit of a waste of time and kind of defeats the purpose of the iPad Pro. That's why I haven't really been using this keyboard case, and I've just been using the folio case. I did try both for long periods of time, and I found that in the end, the iPad Pro should just be used what it's designed for, which is as a tablet for note-taking amongst other things. Or at least that's what it's best for. Whether or not the iPad Pro could fully replace a laptop is a completely separate video, which if you guys want, I can make that one as well. Overall, I do think that the iPad Pro is a pretty excellent note-taking device, whether you get the 11-inch or the larger 12.9-inch. Perhaps if you want to do a lot more multitasking, it would be a good thing to consider the 12.9-inch, just because you have a lot more display space. But if you think you're not really going to be using the multitasking feature that much, then the 11-inch is perfectly fine. And I use this for both, so I also multitask on this, and I've never really had an issue. That's something that's up to personal preference. Of course, the added benefit of having the 11-inch is that even though you lose out on some of that screen real estate, it's a lot more portable. So that's the breakdown. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then please leave a thumbs up. If you want to see more content like this in the future, then definitely hit the subscribe button and notification bell below.